So, when I was in 8th grade, I was stuck inside all summer because of a bus-related injury. Long story. Well, not really. I was riding my bike and I got hit by a bus. Because of that, I spent a lot of time watching stuff I got from my awesome library. I watched the 5 seasons of The X-Files that were out at the time, and more importantly, I found out about anime. I kinda knew it was a thing, but not having cable, all I saw was Pokemon, Digimon, and Mexican DBZ.
No digas tonterías, Goku. Es absurdo que pelee con él. Es verdad que Gohan incrementó sus poderes de una manera sorprendente. Pero se trata de ser un enemigo que ni siquiera tú derrotaste.
Picoro, tú debes saber mejor que nadie que Gohan tiene un extraordinario poder que está fuera de nuestra imaginación.
Oh, and the massacred card captors that made Xiaoran the main character and Sakura's brother not gay. What a long way we've come. But forget about cable, my library to the rescue. There is some true otaku working there because my gateway anime wasn't Naruto or Bleach. I inadvertently was thrust straight into level 4 of the anime obscurity iceberg. The most experimental, avant-garde anime of the late 90s was how I got in, and shows like Serial Experiments Lain, Fooly Cooly, and Neon Genesis Evangelion had a profound impact on me. It opened me up to the weirdness of David Lynch and Darren Aronofsky, and I probably wouldn't be making these videos if it weren't for that anime shelf. So I kept watching, and with the internet came an infinite source of anime, and they were mostly good. But I eventually caught up to the most recent season, and I continued to watch shows just because they were anime, and anime is the best, obviously. That didn't last long before I realized that I had just been watching decades of greatest hits, and most of it was actually kind of trash. But every season always had its few great shows, and that made me rewire my brain a bit. I wasn't an anime fan, I was just a fiction fan, and anime has this certain je ne sais quoi to it that sometimes makes for a good story. It's different than anything Western media has, boring enough to be interesting, but familiar enough to be understood, or at least make a connection with, and often more than a little weird. But at some point in the last few years, something happened. The familiar shonen, shoujo, seinen, josei demographic appeared to be obsolete, while trite and tired plots dominated the seasonal shows. Okay, let me rewind for a second and explain this Josho Sensei thing for anyone who doesn't already know. So, if you have a manga magazine, which is where almost all series find their home, you probably don't want your readers to finish reading Sailor Moon, turn the page, and there's your average chapter of Berserk. So, everything's divided into 4 demographics depending on age and gender, which presumably fits the audience's interests. Shoujo meaning girl, shonen meaning young, but with the connotation of boy, seinen meaning young man, again connotatively, and josei meaning woman. I mean, they're not wrong, but I'd like to think it's more of a scale than an absolute category. I've enjoyed things from all 4 sides of the scale, though I'm having a hard time even thinking of any josei series, much less ones that I liked. Meanwhile, back at the plot, the show's descriptions read like badly constructed Mad Libs. A group of girls starts a club about something, presumably hijinks ensue. In a setting where everyone has a certain skill, the main character doesn't, but he's going to achieve an incredibly unrealistic goal anyway. He somehow acquires a power that's way better than everyone else for no reason at all because plot. Trapped in an MMO, and or transported to a fantasy world. This one is actually so egregious that one Japanese short story contest outright banned entries with that theme. Any other genre is accepted. High school students experience a coming of age. Idols. They're not even tropes, they're just plot pits. Now these shows aren't necessarily bad, even the ones that are blatantly copying a trend. In fact, I count some of them amongst my favorite shows in recent years. But there's no denying that the past 4 or 5 years, let's say, have been pretty cookie cutter with a few notable exceptions. There hasn't been anything risky or experimental, unless you want to count the upcoming Fooly Cooly sequels, which are being co-funded by Adult Swim. Maybe the last shows before The Ancient Magus Bride, which just came out, that I would consider crazy enough to work are Shimoneta and One Punch Man, both in 2015. There have been good shows after them, but nothing that screams, This is the anime that I know and love. I don't think it's too hard to see why this trend started and why it's continuing. Each of these started as something original, had a runaway success, and with it, a million clones that don't understand why the original was a success. Except for idols. That's a different culture entirely, and anything tangentially related will sell no matter what it is. Perfect Blue had it right in its portrayal of those fans as some kind of rabid, entitled, delusional crazy people. Like, it's okay to enjoy their music and performances, but making a 27-year-old woman shave her head and grovel because she got caught having a boyfriend should be criminal.
I'm sorry for making my band members, all the fans, the staff, and my family worry. I apologize to all of them. If it is possible, I wish from the bottom of my heart to stay in the band. Everything I did is entirely my fault. I am so sorry. I don't believe that just by doing this, it means I can be forgiven for what I did. But the first thing I thought was that I don't want to quit AKB48.
And buying 1,000 CDs to rig a literal popularity contest and dumping them in the mountains definitely is. Truly the worst fandom.
Where's my Szechuan sauce? I'm Pickle Rick! What beloved Dum Dum? I'm Pickle Rick!
And that's really saying something. Anyway, all these shows are pandering to what sells DVDs and Blu-rays, which is largely the otaku fan base. That's why there's all these shows with fake self-censorship that sometimes covers the entire screen. You can get the uncensored version on Blu-ray for $80 for 4 episodes, not exaggerating. Here's 4 episodes of Knights and Magic for $91 on sale. There's no space for artistic integrity in an industry that's practically designed, in its current form at least, to be advertising for merchandise and the source material. A lot of those shows I mentioned earlier were made directly into anime rather than adapted from a manga or something. The 90s were a time when artists could just make something and it was either complete trash and it ended their career, or it was the best thing ever. And sometimes it was also the best thing ever and it still ended their career. But the point is, if you keep churning out the same exact safe, formulaic trash for years, people are going to get tired of it. Well, at least some will. After all, why watch a worse variation on the same thing when you can watch a classic you love and could watch forever, one that's got way more worth talking about? Hopefully we're on the verge of a huge change, with Netflix buying up a bunch of shows and their history of mostly having great things come out of that. It could usher in a new wave of innovation, or it could keep going downhill, but I doubt it. I think people, at least in the West, have experienced that same wave that I did, where they watched the best of the backlist that didn't turn them off by its age or art style, and have caught up and now are starting to become disillusioned. But I also see just as many people at anime cons. Lately I'm usually there for business, but I always go to ASEN, which is the biggest con in the Midwest. And I see people spending hundreds of dollars on body pillows and fan service figures. They're the minority in a minority, but I still see this problem of funding the trash while most acclaimed shows don't even have that because they're not centered around fan service, so there's no way to support them with your wallet other than to buy DVDs and manga. And as much as I love Monster, I can't pay $150 for a sixth of the show. Actually, I wouldn't anyway, because all of these are resellers and the money wouldn't go to the creators anyway. Freaking Monster is out of print, looks like. Can I buy some terrible fan service show that came out at the same time, I wonder? Of course I can. In fact, they're doing a reprint in a couple of months. How about that? So I guess the point of this huge rant is, don't watch bad shows, because you're just supporting them. And if you have a Crunchyroll account or something similar that has anime, watch older shows too, not just the current season's mediocre offerings that they're pushing on the front page. I'm gonna circle my personal recommendations in the iceberg until it gets into vague Elder God territory. I'll probably color code it somehow with genre or accessibility or something. The point of this is to get people to watch older shows, which, if you've watched this far in, you're probably at least willing to give it a shot. So I'm assuming I've got some kind of ID system, and I'll scroll that picture, which is incredibly in-depth, and hopefully you'll check out some of those shows. I'll also put my myanimelist.net profile where I've got a partial list, at least, of everything I've ever watched rated. Tastes may vary. So, this video was kind of just a huge rant, and I'm not even sure if it was cohesive or not. Did it make sense? Did I just sound like a crazy person yelling about Jesus on a street corner? I don't know. Do you agree and or disagree about anything? I'd really appreciate a comment about this video in particular, just because it's completely different than my usual style. So let me know what you think. If you have no real opinion on it either way, let me know what your favorite anime of the past 2 or 3 years is. Just out of curiosity, I guess.